This film tracks the spiritual journey of the controversial and charismatic Black Muslim teacher, preacher, and activist Malcolm X. The movie is divided into 3 parts. It charts the early days of X as a Zoom-suited ne'er-do-well, marauding in Boston and Harlem, then the transformative jail years when he converted to Islam, and then his development as a public activist. The quote I chose for this film is, "Like every hustler, I was trapped. Cats that hung out together trying to find a solution found nothing." Whether this quote was chosen because it sparked my interest with the word cat or through actual morality will not be disclosed. Though overall, it resonated with me and drew me in. Even if it isn't a true emblem of the entirety of the film, it diminished something in my mind nonetheless, which is what brings importance to it. The film ultimately begins in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston during the early 1940s, which is in the early years of World War II, where Malcolm is a teenager, getting a fresh cut at the barbers. As the film continues, we go throughout New York. Spike Lee paints the early Harlem scenes in warm, sensuous colors, and then uses cold, institutional lighting for the scenes in prison. For this movie, no particular props are important to the film's setting, or at least that's what I gathered. Furthermore, there are key moments in which the color photography is intercut to black and white, a documentary style that suggests how Malcolm's public image was being shaped and fixed. The entirety of this film proceeds around the civil rights movement as well as dramatizing key events in Malcolm's life, which revolves around a political atmosphere. As we all know, the civil rights movement was a struggle for social injustice that took place mainly during the 1950s and 60s for Black Americans to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The civil rights movement is technically just an umbrella term for the many varieties of activism that sought to secure full political, social, and economic rights. This political movement largely impacted the people of this time and is a large incorporation to Malcolm X's fame and endorsement throughout the entirety of the film. Following from my last slide, it directly ties into how the interpretive genre of American historiography, the New Left, compares to this film. This entire analysis is just a huge blabber of the civil rights movement, so I can only further delve into said topic to describe how this relates to the New Left. This movie takes place in one of the main adaptations of the New Left genre, and I quote from the Analysis Handbook, "Renewed emphasis on conflict and polarization fed by the civil rights struggle." This movie revolves around key points of Malcolm X's life, one of those key points being his prominent position in the movement. He was a leader within the movement, a minister and supporter of Black nationalism. He put himself at odds within the common nonviolence in the movement, which separated him from nonviolent teachings such as Martin Luther King Jr. It took me nearly a split second to see how this film depicts a complete continuity. The racial injustice, the riots, the Black Lives Matter movement. We have a new civil rights movement on our hands now in the 21st century. It's one that has always been prevalent, but it's more distinguishable now, which is police brutality. Before I delve into that topic, this movie was about Malcolm X, those key points in his life. So what is the political and social relevancy of Malcolm X? People seem to be more racially aware, or just aware in general, when they see Malcolm's story made throughout the biopic. They realize that this misconduct hasn't only been prevalent throughout past history, but recent history that has been made. And maybe I'm speaking in third person with this excerpt. This movie really opened my eyes to the social injustice in our society today. The change throughout this injustice has been so minute that it's barely even noticeable. So back to what I was stating before. Although such racial inequality has gotten significantly better over the years, it can still be seen in instances such as the Trayvon Martin case, as it strongly resembles the Emmett Till case, and the unnecessary police brutality displayed against African American males, such as the one that took place on March 18, 2015, against Martise Johnson, a 29-year-old African American honors student at the University of Virginia. He did not resist arrest, but was still beaten to the point that he needed to have 10 stitches. This prompted students to begin protesting at the university while chanting "Black Lives Matter," in the same way that young people marched in Selma, Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. As we know, the Civil Rights Movement has definitely caused current events, since I can't exactly relate how Malcolm X has led society itself, besides saying that he has left an impact on the world he has left. His autobiography additionally popularized his prominent ideas and incited the Black Power movement. Furthermore, the Civil Rights Movement, which he had a large involvement in, led to greater social and economic mobility for African Americans across the nation and banned racial discrimination, providing greater access to resources for women, religious minorities, African Americans, and low-income families. Ultimately, it established more woke media and awareness for occurrences as such.
Hello?
Hello, Betty?
Yes?
Yes, it's Malcolm.
I know.
Right, I'm here in Detroit. Will you marry me?
Yes.
You heard what I said, right?
Did you hear my answer?
Yes, I think so.
Brother Malcolm? Are you eating?
Yeah, I've been eating.
Good.
I love you, Betty.
I love you back.
Overall, after distinguishing all of this, I'd give this film a 4.5 out of 5 stars for the slight historical imbalance in the story. Otherwise, Spike Lee made a beautiful cinematic piece.